Well, I'm headed out from Tony's Deli at 5:45 a.m. I had to hang from two trees that were pretty far apart, which puts extra stress on the ropes when you can't get the right angle. My Beckett hitch slipped last night around 4 a.m. right after the train came through. So I figured it was time to get up. So this will be my earliest start. And since it's supposed to be like 92 degrees today, the more I can get my miles in the cool of the morning, the better off. So trying to go early, go slow, take it easy. Got 3 big climbs today before we get to Schaghticoke campsite. A little 0.4 mile road walk to the trail. Oh, and one other note, the roads and the trains weren't actually too bad. I wore my earplugs and you might wake up momentarily or be a little groggy. The thing that made it hard to sleep last night was another camper who joined us, another hiker who joined us, who snores like all get out. That was much harder to deal with. Hopefully get a better sleep tonight. Okay, that's where the food truck was yesterday. And this was actually a 0.7 mile road hike. You get all these extra miles that don't go into the trail miles, and you try to minimize them. But hey, sometimes hiking 0.7 off trail for some food and a place to stay is worth it when the next shelter is 5 miles down the road and you're tired. Well, one of the things that you have to be ready for on an early morning walk is you're going to get wet feet. Now here in the grass you got a lot of dew, but sometimes even in the woods where you've got branches and vines kind of hanging into the trail, you're going to brush into them. Your legs are going to get wet and it's going to drip down to your socks and shoes. And some people wonder whether they should get waterproof shoes. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but if you want your feet to be dry and you're hiking, generally you want non-waterproof shoes. And there's a couple reasons. One of them is that, you know what, if it rains or whatever, every shoe has a giant hole in it where your foot goes in and water gets in that way. So that's one thing. Another thing is that waterproof shoes are slightly heavier, they're much hotter, and despite claims of breathability, nothing breathes as well as open mesh. And so what you want are shoes that will dry fast rather than shoes that will prevent your feet from getting wet in the first place. Now, this may be different if you're doing just a day hike or you're trail running or something like that. Maybe you just want your feet to stay dry. But generally speaking, waterproof shoes, once they do get wet, take forever to dry. One kind of workaround is that some people will carry waterproof socks like sealskins, and they work okay. And if you really want your feet to stay dry, that's one solution. Another solution is to get an oven roaster bag, the kind of nylon bags that they use to cook turkeys in, except you don't want the turkey size. It's a little bit too big. You want the next size down, which is for roasts. And you can wear a liner sock, then put the oven roaster bag over the liner sock, and then put your regular sock over that. And it will keep your feet nice and dry. It's also a really common technique in winter hiking, when you don't want the sweat from your feet to permeate into your boot, and when you take your boots off at night, then your boots freeze because they have all this residual sweat vapor embedded in them. So anyway, if you're interested in some hiking tips, that's one reason why many hikers will not wear a waterproof shoe. In fact, I haven't seen anybody except the occasional person wearing boots wearing a waterproof shoe. Where is the trail? Oh, it's over there. That's weird. Also, because it's supposed to get to 92 degrees today, and I checked the map and there's not a lot of good water for a while, I am packing an extra liter, because despite what I said about people packing their anxieties, sometimes our anxieties are not unreasonable, and it's just part of good planning. Life, complicated, much more art than science. It's almost 7 o'clock, not quite 7 o'clock, and I'm just about done with the first big climb. Got 3 today. Feels good to get one of them out of the way. Ooh, better be quiet, someone's might be sleeping. So, completing the first climb feels good. The ridge has a slight descent. I'm getting that morning sunshine, kind of fantasy forest look today. It's always pretty. Sun-dappled forest floor is not always so welcome because it sometimes conceals the rocks, but surprisingly this section is pretty smooth. And yesterday I heard that Santiago was about an hour and a half ahead of me, so I'm guessing he went on to the next shelter, and it's still early enough. If he's there, I may catch him before he leaves. Still thinking about the packing our anxieties from 2 days ago, and I don't know why I didn't think of it at the time, but the movie Parasite was such a great example of that. I mean, in many ways the family were parasites living off of other people, but even more than that, maybe the rich family were the parasites, not doing a lot of anything themselves, but relying on others to do it for them. Maybe especially the patriarch of that family. But in some ways, the ultimate parasite was ambition itself. In the way the young man, when they had to evacuate their apartment, it's all flooded, and they can only carry a few things with us, and he felt compelled to carry that success stone, that scholar stone, and held it to him, and even described it kind of like having a life of its own and clinging to him. That's the ultimate parasite. Kind of like, actually, not unlike these vines that pull down these trees. And it's crazy because, you know, I remember working on these vines by the Mystic River. These vines grow up and they wrap themselves around the trees, and sometimes they even cut into the trees. And with their incredible weight, eventually they pull the trees down, which doesn't even help themselves. It destroys themselves too, because they can no longer reach up. Look how thick that vine is. That's a vine reaching up and pulling down on that tree. But sometimes that's like the anxieties or weights that we have in our own lives. Look at this, another network of these vines pull down a tree and blocking the trail. It's not just that we're packing our anxieties are literally like Hebrews 12:1, the weight that hinders. And, you know, it's one thing to be packing our anxieties, it's another thing to be trapped by a weight that is crushing and choking and pulling you down. Even if it's something like ambition. Sometimes we can't by ourselves divest ourselves of the weight that we carry, because the weight clings to us. And we need the help of one another. We need accountability. We need the power of God to liberate us from these weights that we carry. I could go into a whole thing about QAnon and how people are trapped by a similar vine that feeds off of anxiety, and it's a weight that so powerfully entangles. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his letters from prison, wrote that when people are trapped in such a state, you can't reason with them. You can't just convince them. Instead, the only thing you can do is hopefully liberate them so that they can then finally see the truth. So it doesn't help to argue when you have to liberate, because when you argue, you actually make yourself appear like the enemy, the oppressor, rather than the liberator. Anyway, something to think about. All right, crossing into Connecticut. It's not permanent. We'll be crossing back into New York again and then back into Connecticut. But gonna refresh my bug spray, because this is ground zero for Lyme disease, right? But also crossing into New England, and I just met some of the New York, or maybe it was Connecticut Ridge Runners. And I'm a little ahead of my group, so I could take advantage of the morning hours and keep moving on. All right, Connecticut. All easy from here, right? Well, I just finished the second big ascent of the day. This is Temple Hill in Connecticut. I think you can notice from this and the past videos an immediate difference in how much more effort Connecticut puts into trail maintenance. It's not overgrown, no blowdowns. I'm seeing much less poison ivy. It's nice. In any case, now that I'm done with the second out of 3 big ascents, I've got a big descent into town where I can get probably lunch, maybe late lunch, and a cold drink, take a siesta, and then final ascent and push to Schaghticoke campgrounds. Just finished the third and final sustained climb of the day. It's 2:10 in the afternoon. Had an extended lunch break during the heat of the day. It's still pretty hot, and got about 2.5 miles that way to go to camp. Oh, I'm so glad it's gonna be cooler tomorrow. All right, that third climb did me in. I got up this morning around 4 and got on the road early. Got 2/3 of my miles done by 11 o'clock. But the last 5 or 6 miles with that last climb were just excruciating. It's been so hot today, but the humidity's low, and here in the shade at the campsite, laying in my hammock, there's a breeze flowing underneath me, so I'm feeling pretty good. And crossed into Connecticut today, and Massachusetts is soon, and in a week I will be home. Looking forward to it. I like being on the trail, but I'm looking forward to being home too.